tonight. She is the co-founder and CEO of Motherly, which is a modern lifestyle brand redefining motherhood with its 30 million plus audience a month. And she's the author of multiple books. And she's passionate about serving and empowering women and mothers, because when mamas are successful, everybody wins, which we just feel aligns so much with what we do here at Hive. And we are very thankful that she is willing to share her story of entrepreneurship, being a mother. And we're also thrilled to welcome her to the Park City community. She moved here in August with her family, her husband, and two children. And so I will hand it over to Jill, who can kick it off. And thank you so much.
Excellent. Thank you all so much for having me. I think we connected through initially the Park City Education Foundation. So it's really great to see. I've tried to jump right into the community here and have found everyone to be so welcoming, and I'm so happy to be here. So thank you all for coming. I was sharing with the Hive ladies before that it's an interesting thing as an entrepreneur and as a CEO to talk about yourself when you spend so much time talking about your business, and you get in pitch mode. And my co-founder actually says I'm like a wind up doll, just, wind me up and point me wherever I need to go. And I can, pitch Motherly in an instant. And so this is a different experience to tell my story, and the hopes that maybe you can relate to parts of it, that you can, perhaps be motivated through something related to it, and that I can answer questions, that maybe come up for you through that. And at Motherly, and personally, I really believe in radical transparency. I do these types of conversations in part because I really firmly believe that if you see it, you can be it. And that having examples of people of that seem like you, that have, similar experiences in some way, can be very empowering. And so that's why I have these kinds of conversations. And again, I'm really open to any of your questions. So please don't hesitate. And like Sarah said, you can send them to her if you want it to be anonymous. But I did make a little presentation because I thought visuals, who doesn't like a visual here? So it's not just my face staring at you the whole time. So I'll screen share here, and I'll spend about 10 minutes really just going through my personal story. And then from there, talk a little bit more. We can delve deeper into the entrepreneurship journey, assuming that that's of interest. And we can talk a little bit about the state of motherhood generally, which is one of the things I'm very passionate about and a big initiative for Motherly. And then answer questions. So if that works for everyone, I'll screen share. There we go. Okay, so everyone should be able to see here. Does that seem right? You guys can see what I'm doing there? Okay, great. All right, so I'm going to go into presentation mode here, and I can still see your lovely faces, at least some of them. Okay, so I'm Jill Koziol. I'm a wife, I'm a mother, I'm a co-founder and CEO. I'm a multiple sclerosis warrior, as we call ourselves, and I'm an advocate. And there are a lot of things that have happened in my life that frankly make it statistically out of the ordinary, that I would be standing here today as the CEO of a venture-backed business. And that starts with the fact that I am a woman, and so few women are in fact CEOs, let alone venture-backed CEOs. I'm also a mother. So you take that very small pool and slice it by the number of women that are actually mothers as well. I was also in a car accident 20 years ago that should have taken my voice, if not my life. And I'm also a first generation college student. And that is, again, when you combine all of those things together, and there's more to come, but when you combine those things to be sitting here in front of you as the CEO of a venture-backed company, that was not written in the stars. This is not me coming from a family of, entrepreneurs that, or a family that had their own venture company that was able to fund my business. And so still here I stand with you. And I also have multiple sclerosis. And so when you layer on all of these different things, I feel very empowered because of those things that I've overcome over time. But it also, I think, is a reminder that everyone is carrying their bag of rocks, or things that could have made them say, no, this isn't for me. That everyone has different things that they're overcoming, no matter how they maybe look when you're first meeting them. Oh, okay. I have to admit people, looks like, as they come in. Um, so, um, and so despite all of that, I am in fact the CEO of Motherly. We are a well-being brand that is empowering mothers to thrive. And at the moment, 5 years in, we're empowering 30 million women per month to thrive. They gather to connect with each other, to learn, and to buy things. We're the single most effective platform that's really connecting with mom, that's real, relatable, and many times raw. Uh, so my story starts not in Utah, not in California, but in St. Mary's County, Maryland, at Green Manor Farm. I actually have three brothers and grew up like this is my grandparents' farm, living next to them. And I have 20 first cousins. And as I mentioned, first generation college student. My father's first job was a Frito-Lay truck driver. He did ultimately become an entrepreneur himself and was quite successful businessman, and really instilled in me and in my brothers very early on that the power of hard work and of passion and perseverance in things. And I can remember over the years talking about business at the dinner table. I can remember the lessons that came from that. I remember the really hard times. I remember the great times, and saw the steadiness that had to come with that. But the fact that it didn't look like it is on the movies, right? That you launch a business and you're successful. I learned that there's nothing like 10 plus years of hard work to look like an overnight success. And that was really instilled in me very, very quickly. I mean, I had a job from the time I was 14. I worked at Tidewater Pharmacy, a local pharmacy, and have never really stopped working since then. My parents did, however, instill in me and my brothers that college was not a question. We were absolutely going to go to college. They had not, their siblings had not, but we were going. But even though they were convicted about that, that didn't mean that the journey was easy. They didn't know what a syllabus was. They had never taken the SATs. They really didn't understand or navigate that. They put opportunities in front of me to the best that they could, but not in the way, frankly, that I'll be able to do for my own daughters. And so the work that we do, like at the foundation, the Education Foundation with Bright Stars and all of those types of programs, I'm really convicted about, because I know the power that that can have to help children who are convicted that they can get someplace, but don't necessarily have the tools to do that. And so despite, coming from this area that was pretty rural, we were only 45 minutes from Washington, D.C. though. So there's this big juxtaposition between things. And I did attend a leadership conference at the American University when I was, I think, in high school. And I got to tell you, the genie was out of the bottle. I was so quickly able to see how big the world was. And I just didn't feel constrained anymore. I felt like I was destined for a bigger life, and my family really did support those dreams. And then 2 days before Christmas in 1996, I was in a really bad car accident. And I should have died in that initial car accident, and definitely shouldn't have been able to speak. It was a friend was driving, and the car hit on the right side, right behind me, and the door popped open. And you may recall those cars from back in the 90s where the seatbelt would go across and you'd have to only buckle the bottom of it. Well, we'd been at, I think, like a Hardee's or something, and I had forgotten to buckle the bottom part when I got back in the car. So there's a false sense of security when that happens. And so the car door popped open when the other car hit, and I was ejected, but the seatbelt wrapped around my neck and broke my windpipe in half before I was ejected. And so very devastating, and really, like, by a millimeter missed my vocal cords and from slicing those. And so, the thing though about that is that once a fire has been lit, it can be hard to put out. And so I was still I recovered incredibly well and went on to let that be something that just is like very back there. And it took me a while to find this photo, actually. And life moved on. I went to college. I went to grad school. I met my husband, Pete, we got married at the Naval Academy where he went to school. And, through it all, I really had mentors that helped me to excel. It only takes one person, and I was lucky enough to have many people along that path. I remember Dick Safransky, a mentor from mine at one of my first jobs out of college. as I was leaving, he said, I think you'll be a CEO one day. And all it takes is one person that like can believe in you and put that idea in your head. And here I am, Dick. And then, Pete and I went on to have our two daughters, and we settled in the Bay Area after my husband completed business school. So this is Claire and Catherine. They're now 7 and 9 years old. And I actually started my first business there we go. I started my first business in the Bay Area, in fact. That's Claire on the cover. I invented, patented, and brought to market the Swing Ease, which converts regular playground swings to toddler swings, to baby and toddler swings. And this is important because as part of my journey, because I went to the playground, I needed something, and I did like every good mom, I went to Amazon and it didn't exist. And I, not like every mom, went to Google Patent to see if this thing actually existed. And, this started out, it's very like Shark Tank kind of story. I really took the fabric and I went to a seamstress and we just iterated and iterated and iterated. And I had an old colleague who was an engineer who became my co-founder for this. And we got it in Every Babies Are Us, which you can see there. And I really learned the power of brand and marketing to mom. And again, just the hard work that it comes to bring an idea to life. Then let's see, what's going to be the next slide here? Oh, another life quake. So another hospital, sad one. So my family and I then relocated to New York City, and we'd been there for less than a month, I think, maybe 2 months. And my daughter, Catherine, 2 days before she turned 8 months old, I was prepping for them for baths, and my husband was coming home to take the laundry downstairs, as one does in New York. And I set out 2 detergent pods and put them on top of the hamper. And I turned for a moment, a split second, and life happens in a split second. And Catherine, at 8 months old, pulled herself to standing for the very first time, and she bit into a detergent pod. And I am the kind of mom that had poison control and speed dial. And so I called poison control, and they said, oh, well, if she starts to vomit, then you should call because she might asphyxiate, but detergent's not so bad. Don't worry about that. Luckily, she did start to vomit, and I really trusted my gut instinct, and I called, and I didn't even know where the hospital was, next to our apartment. We'd been there for such a short time. And luckily I did trust my instincts, because a couple hours later, she was intubated right before my eyes. And because she had airway protection issues, she started having stridor and all kinds of issues related to that. And that's the moment that a consumer advocate was born in me. And so I took on Procter & Gamble and held congressional hearings and worked with the consumer safety groups and the Procter & Gamble legal teams to establish new marketing requirements and try to new safety mechanisms and the such related to it. Because I really felt that if this could happen to me, that I had a responsibility to share the message far and wide that it could happen. And this is something that I'm still involved with. Consumer Reports, it's one of the first, except for SUVs that were having problems like rolling over, a decade or two ago. This is the only product that Consumer Report has ever, said that they will not recommend. And so I'm still involved in working and supporting them with that. And so for me, motherhood was really a catalyst in so many different ways. I think we're taught with our careers that motherhood is sidetracks you, that it takes you off of the path. And for me, I feel that it really connected me with a strength and a power that I didn't even realize I had, that I hadn't been exposed to what was really inside me, the transformation that I experienced. It made me really passionate about serving others and mothers specifically in this very messy transformation of motherhood, this beautiful, messy transformation. And so I was raised by my parents to leave things better, in a big and small ways along it. And so while I believe that there are many different ways to leave your mark on the world, I really think that motherhood is one of the most profound ways to have an impact. I do believe that when mothers thrive, that families can thrive, and then ultimately the world can thrive. And so I think that it's, for me, one of the most impactful ways to change the world. And so in 2015, founded Motherly with my co-founder, Liz Tennedy. And a startup is hard, which we'll talk more about, but it's made much harder because of the inequities faced by women and by mothers, but we did do it. And really, really proud of what we've built. But then 3 months later, I was diagnosed with MS. So, the hits keep coming for everyone. And so I started to have some eyesight issues, and I worked through them like any good mom and entrepreneur does, and ultimately went to the optometrist, and very quickly, very blessed to quickly be diagnosed with MS. Like any significant medical diagnosis, I was really rocked to my core. There are things whenever you have a health diagnosis that you don't realize, things you had envisioned for yourself in the future. And when they're taken away, you start to mourn something you don't even realize you had expected, right? Like hiking with my husband when we were older, and dancing at my children's wedding. And for me, this really stole that for me for a short while. But like, moms and entrepreneurs, like life goes on. And so really pushing through that, I'm very, very lucky that I have amazing doctors, and I'm incredibly privileged to have access to insurance and to medical care and great support structures, so that I actually have no symptoms from MS. I'm immunosuppressed a bit, and because of my treatments, which are every 6 months. But otherwise, it really hasn't slowed me down at all. And now I try to use the platform that I've been, that I've built through Motherly, to show others who are diagnosed that there is a way to thrive with MS, and that a diagnosis today does not look the way a diagnosis 10 years ago looked. And so today I'm really laser focused, of course, on my family, but on growing Motherly to be a category defining brand. We are now increasingly using our platform to talk about and give voice to modern mothers, and have that voice be heard. We're about to launch our 4th annual State of Motherhood survey, which is the largest statistically significant survey of modern moms. And I can share some of the results from that. We did the one last year, and then very quickly COVID happened. So we did an addendum related to that. And this year's results are really going to show just the true impact that COVID has had on moms. We all know that mothers are bearing an uneven burden during this pandemic. Nearly 1 million women in September alone dropped out of the workforce. Not surprisingly, that is because that's when school starts back up, and the majority of the country is in distance learning, where someone needs to be there guiding most children. And so this is something that I'm incredibly passionate about, and I believe in part built Motherly to provide this voice through it. And so, yeah, that's Motherly. And of course, I have to show a picture of my husband here. So through this all, certainly my husband, Pete, is my partner in this. He's in finance. We have 2 very intense careers, and 2 really lovely ladies as daughters. But I said once, and I really believe that this is true, that one of the best things I did for my career, one of the most important decisions I made, was who to marry. Because we have taken turns with our careers. I drop the kids off at school. He picks them up from school. We've really found ways to respect and support each other. And without that, frankly, and that great privilege that I have in having a partner that is that supportive, I probably wouldn't be able to do much of what I've been able to do with Motherly so far. So I'll stop sharing there. I hope that was, helpful just to hear the story, and, hopefully at least a little bit interesting. But I can talk more about Motherly and kind of the entrepreneurship side of the journey, but I'm curious, Sarah, if you've gotten any questions, or if anyone wants to ask any questions, just to kick us off too.
Well, I actually have a question to kick you off about the state of motherhood at like a high level. What are you asking? Who's answering the questions? And like what I know that this year, will probably be very, very different, but I'm very interested in what surprises you about what you're learning about the state of motherhood?
So this will be the 4th annual year, and every year we keep about 75% of the survey the same, so we can see changes over time. But every year 25% is different, and so this year it will certainly be around COVID and implications related to that. But the way that we run this is we ask our entire audience, and we do this far and wide. So we have about 8,000 people, I think, that submitted it last year, and it's a pretty lengthy. It takes about 10 minutes to do the survey. So to have 8,000 people do that, and then we actually do the hard work we outsource it to a statistical analysis firm, and they weight the results to the US demographics. For in the past, millennial moms, and this year we're going to spread it to like Gen Z as well. And so to make sure that the results that we're sharing are actually representative of who today's mother is in the United States. And so, and then this year we're going a step further. This has been, credibility building for us initially. So we ran this all ourselves, and, we would do press and things like that related to it. This year, I actually today reached out to about 10 different organizations to show them a draft of the survey and to make sure that their organization's missions were represented in the questions, because this is original data, right? And so if the Mom Project, for example, we've reached out to, and if and we can do this with you guys as well. And so to see are there specific questions that you would like asked, and we probably can't entertain all of them, but we want to make sure that we're covering important topics that further the mission of other organizations. And so reaching out to a more diverse group as well of organizations to make sure we're getting a very broad spectrum and really focused on inclusiveness. But some of the things that have been the first couple of years were just frankly validating, like culture doesn't support mothers, employers don't support mothers, government doesn't support mothers, and just really putting numbers to that and validating it. Last year, we started asking some more interesting questions. And I was saddened to see that a majority of women are, for example, having sex postpartum before they are ready to. And that was a really digging into to the things that mom doesn't talk about, right? We hear jokes on movies and things that, oh, maybe the doctor will tell you, you can wait a little longer than 6 weeks, but, and we see those, like they're made to be jokes almost out in culture, but to put a really fine point on it and to see the number of women that, acknowledge that, yeah, I was intimate before I felt ready postpartum. And that sparked a conversation, which was really important. This year, we'll be asking questions about alcohol use during COVID. We'll be asking about, CBD and other kinds of like self-medicating things that we're doing, that mothers are doing. We'll talk about the village and where that is and how you found it during this time. We'll talk about how your employers are supporting you or not supporting you. So there's a lot of really richness in the questions this year that I think are going to take it a level deeper. We're also asking, in the very polarizing world that we live in, there's rarely like a survey of what today's mom thinks about a lot of social justice issues, for example. And so we're asking like the really hard questions, and we're going to share the results on like, do you believe in this? Do you believe in that? And I think that is such a bellwether for the future, because moms are the biggest influencers in the world also. And so that really helps us see the way that our culture is going as well.
I think that's so interesting, because I was just reflecting on this the other day. I was walking my kids home from school, and there are so many causes that I have not been able to participate in since becoming a mom. Mm-hmm. And that is a part of me that I've had to reconcile a little bit. And I've taken action in other ways. But I think that, one thing that my husband and I decided was that what we wanted to do and to make an impact for the world for this portion of our life is to raise really good human beings. Mm-hmm. But it's hard to see it long term. Like, I know my parents see it now, but I remember being a kid and watching, like you talk about where you remember the conversations at the dinner table, right? About business. And that, I think, is so great to hear, because we are in that position now ourselves, but it's hard to see it and know it's sinking in with our kids. So,
well, because it's a crapshoot. That's why it's good to have multiple just in case, right? Yeah. One will turn out okay. But no, it is, they're sponges. And like, you're right. We see it in very small ways now. But, you know, I think back, my father volunteered with Christmas in April, that I think it's the last Sunday in April, like rebuilds houses in the community. And it was just always so ingrained in like who and what he was, like that service. And so like it's just innate, it's part of me. I don't even think about it, right? In that way. And I completely agree with you. With our, I used to be more involved with our church, for example, and I used to like teach, we're Catholic, and I used to teach like CCD, and now like there's no way, and I count on other people to teach my kids CCD, but my ministry right now is motherhood, right? It is that, it is my way of bringing goodness into the world. And it's one of the most powerful things that humans can do, and most impactful things long-term.
I know that we do want to move on to your, the entrepreneurial aspect of your life and your world, but I do have a question for you. And it has to do with the mental load that mothers deal with. I think we all dealt with it so much beforehand. And I think a lot of that mental load comes from the messaging that we should have it all, right? So we can be a mom, we can have a career, we can find the right partner, we can go on adventures, we can be grounded and have our own time, but we can also have a great, you know, social network. So I guess my question comes to you in kind of pre and post pandemic, because you've had Motherly for that time, and what you're seeing with this kind of, like, I call it like the invisible work of like wiping down the counters and cleaning. And I have a great partner, but like, it's just this invisible work and this mental workload. And I'm kind of wondering, like, for you, what you find, like, are the things that you've had to give up? Because we've heard about what you've been able to do, but like, how do you manage that mental load? Yeah.
So it's definitely real. And it is, even having a great partner, I literally last night said to my husband, do you ever notice that I don't stop moving? Like, you know how you're sitting down now at the end of the day and the kids are in bed and, you know, you're on your phone or about to watch, do you notice that I'm still moving around in the house, right? And he's like, I do see that you're doing that. What are you doing? And so what I think has happened, and what we found has happened, is that women have been layering roles for a really long time. We were the homemakers. Then we entered the workforce, and we had to, you know, generations before us, God bless them for all the work that they did, they had to pretend even more than we do that they didn't actually have a family. They had to take on masculine stereotypically masculine traits in order to get ahead, or many of them had to sacrifice families altogether in order to show that women could do the work outside the home. What has shifted now is that the millennial generation is the first generation in US history in which women are more educated than men. Full stop. And that means that not only is it's no longer a nice to have for employers to hire women and be diverse. It's actually a business imperative. It's a competitive imperative. And your most educated cohort is most likely going to become a mom, because the vast majority of women become a mom. And because she's having children, because she went to college and she's, you know, working, she's a middle manager by the time she has a mom. And so this leaky pipeline of talent happens. And this all weighs into then that mental load and that invisible work, because we have been layering roles and we have not let go of them. And part of it is societal expectations, because even if my husband is the one who organizes play dates in the afternoon because he picks the children up, the text messages or the emails still come to me to coordinate it, right? The assumption is that I'm the one to do it. The other day, actually, my daughter's piano teacher wanted to change her thing, and I got like 4 voicemails. First off, I'm like, who leaves voicemails these days? Like, send me a text or an email, come on. But I had all these things, and I'm on back-to-back Zooms all day. And at the end of the day, I mentioned to my husband, he's like, oh yeah, they finally called me, I dealt with it. I'm like, okay, great. But still, I'm the default parent, right? And just like all of you probably are, we are the default over and over and over again. But many of us are in fact layering these roles. And so one is just that, like, we can't shed them. We really need men to start to layer them on, partners to layer them on. And then there's the part that we don't like to admit, which is control, and we don't like to let go of that. And so, because again, that societal judgment, well, if the birthday party is a hot mess, then because my husband organized it, the assumption is it was me that did that. And there's like just the judginess that does come from that. And so my husband and I once a month get together and like reset and re-level things. So like I do the pediatrician appointments and he does the dentist appointments. Now, truth be told, they still have a lot of baby teeth. So I figure can't get that bad with the dental appointments. But I mean, it's baby steps. And also I think it's important to note that this generation of mothers is doing something that is really different. We are trying to build families, and to our partners' credits, that do not look like our families did. We're trying to change the mold and break the mold. And that is hard. It is hard to go against the norm of what you saw. Again, if you see it, you can be it. Well, we all know exactly how to raise a family just like we were raised, but we're trying to do something different. And that is so awesome. And trying counts. What the pandemic did is, like any, every human, when posed with a big challenge or with an emergency or conflict, we revert to what's comfortable. And frankly, raising a family the way we were raised is more comfortable. You fall back into those things. And so I think the pandemic, and you see this again with women leaving the workforce at a disproportionate rate, we fell back into gender norms. We fell back into things that felt comfortable and that made sense. And I really worry that we've undone a lot of progress, and both economically and societally, and just, even just the norms that we've established inside our own families, how we've done that. And so we're going to have to work really hard to undo that. But that mental load, it's at every single level. It's the fact that we don't value caregiving generally in this country. And so that invisible work, I think, was made more visible this year because we had partners home and we had Zoom and we have children walking in and all of those types of things. But what we choose to do with that as a society is going to be really important, and it remains to be seen. That was a long answer because I got a lot of soapbox energy behind that one.
That's awesome. And a wonderful response to it, because there is just so much mental load that I think all of us have taken on in the last 12 months. So do you want to talk about entrepreneurship, or and go into Motherly, or should we take a couple more questions? What would you like to do?
I personally love questions. I see Madison. I think Jenny, you unmuted yourself. So if you want to go, Jenny.
Sure. First off, thank you so much for sharing your journey. It's incredibly impressive and heartbreaking at times. Congrats on what you've accomplished, and yeah, really fun to hear how you got where you did. I guess for me, I care deeply about my career. I've been a mom for 3.5 years now, and I feel like I have made the transition to be a mother and embrace that. But I'm really torn and challenged on how to blend work with my family, to the point that I, as you've alluded, like many mothers, partition out my life and essentially pretend that on a sick day, my kid's sick, they're home with me. Well, I'm going to close them in a room and try not to let anybody hear that they're home, because I want to have an executive presentation review and do great and shine, and I don't want to have to cancel it. But I pretty much have to decide career or family daily, and I don't think it should be that way. I also work in a more male dominant culture, and of 30 people on my immediate department team, I'm one of 2 with children, and I'm the only mother. So uphill battle, but I just want to pick your brain on, do you have tips for how I might get my corporate culture to start to realize and give space for mothers to actually involve their children and bring the strength and the motivation that has empowered me with, and actually have that be a meaningful part of what I bring to the table versus have to partition it out and hide it, essentially.
It's hard one, Jenny. It really, really is, because you're still doing the good work of that. You're the next level of that woman that like didn't have a family to prove that women could work, right? Like it is that we're still on the journey, especially in more male dominated worlds. And the first is, which are actually quite powerful, are the employee groups around it. So even though there's only 2 in yours that have families, I'm hoping it sounds like maybe it's a larger company where there are other parents perhaps. And so establishing that, and heck, even if there's just 2 of you, like establish it, because ultimately most of those people will become parents, right? At some point. And so it is, anyone who's in a minority when one is in a minority, it does not feel comfortable or fair, frankly, to have to represent that minority. However, it is a weight of responsibility that often comes with that. And you can choose to take up that mantle or to not. And to take it up is to call attention to those things, and to be the person who, instead of having their child, like pulls them in and says, like, here's George, like, he's not sick. He's sick today. He just wanted to come and say hi, and normalizing it. Right. And I think that COVID has, in many cases, helped to normalize that to some extent, because there are just children, less so here in Utah, but around the country, so many children are home. And so I think just trying to normalize it a little bit. And as a manager, if you are in a management role, again, modeling that like, I do shut down between this time. Like, this is my sacred time for dinner with my family, right? Like I do have to compartmentalize my life, because my life is very full. So I turn my phone off during dinner time, and like talking about those boundaries that are set. And then also occasionally talking about the power that motherhood has brought you, like saying to people that, I thought I was a great multitasker before I became a mom. And now I'm, I didn't even know what multitasking was before then. And so I think really just starting to normalize it and talk about it, and then establishing an employee resource group around it, where you can share articles and you can share things and you can encourage and empower each other to talk about it as well. Is an important part. And that group then can come together to advocate for new benefits too, which is really important, which might be flexible work, which might be, permanently remote work. It might be ways to introduce children, or have, things that are family related within the business. But I will also, it sounds like you've been a mom for, 3.5 years, you said. It does get easier. It really does. You're still in the depths of it right now. And it's not balance. You're right. It's compartmentalization a lot of times, and it's not fair. And, but it does get easier. There are seasons to everything. And just like motherhood, once you get through one phase, the next one pops up to surprise you. The same thing will happen career-wise with you as well. But, also one last thing is, again, know your power. We are the most educated cohort out there right now, and understanding that there is power associated with that, and that women, especially if you're a minority in a business, there is power to that. And so use that power, right? And find ways to recruit more in, through your hiring and the others, or also, show them what others are doing and how they're not going to be competitive to bring in this incredibly educated and competitive group. I hope that helps a little bit.
It really does. That was a lot of good nuggets. Thank you. And it's funny, I recognize that with some people, I feel I can share my motherhood side, but most people I don't. So I'll be more cognizant of it. And I really appreciate those tips.
So it's not like telling like about, the explosive diaper, the night before, but it's normalizing just that you have children. Like, what'd you do this weekend? Oh, well, we went sledding this weekend. It's just little small things along the way. And again, especially if you're in a leadership or management role, it's setting guardrails around it and being unapologetic about those guardrails.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Hi, Madison.
Hi, can you hear me? I took myself off mute. So I'm a new mom. I am the mom to a 7-month-old baby girl. And Jill, you had mentioned just briefly that you and your husband like sit down every month and kind of divvy out the roles and touch base again. And I think that that's something that that really just kind of struck a chord to me, because it's totally different than what I had anticipated because of COVID. And so everything that I thought that motherhood was going to entail has been completely different. I got laid off at the beginning of COVID. I've always had a job and been very successful as a surgical PA. I got laid off when elective surgery got canceled. My husband works for Apple and has worked from home for years, but now he's fully at home all the time. And so the amount that our rules changed with COVID, and then the amount that our rules changed with having a baby, I'm back to work full time and really trying to figure out how to do that. I just hoped you could expound a little bit upon like what you found that works for you and your husband to try to make sure that all of these new roles and all the changed roles make that you feel like you have partner equity.
Yes, you could probably see me typing. I was just pulling up an article that I wrote for Medium around this, that dads who are equal partners aren't overachievers. They're doing their job, and gets through like my own personal story. I think I wrote this last year because I think it was right before our 9-year anniversary, and we've been married 10 years now. Man, it's hard. It's really hard because I don't think we talk about it in like, if you did any like premarital counseling or anything like that. I don't think you talk about what kind of parent you want to be, maybe a little bit, or what you want to do different that your parents did. But like, no one talks about how you're going to divide up the mental load of parenting. Right. And so it's important that your career be valued. And one of the things that I think, and having a conversation and frankly, demanding that from your partner. And one of the things that I see happen time and time again is that when women are talking about their value in the workforce and to their family as working, they subtract childcare from their job's salary. It is not just your child. That childcare cost should be deducted evenly from both of your salaries, because you both have jobs and you both have a child. And so I think that changes just the conversation, right, around financial, like why you are working, and what you contribute to the family as a result. And so that can be one important part, is just recognizing like the financial contributions that are made, because that's a big part of why we all work. And so that's one, is just ensuring that you feel valued in this partnership. And if that baseline respect isn't there, then that has to be worked on first. From there, it's literally write everything down. You have to write down every single thing that you do, and you probably have to like write it down for like gear up, write it down for a month if you need to, of every single, just keep a little list of everything that you've done and try to categorize it. That's what my husband and I did the first time, is we categorized it around, things that were taking care of the house, things that were taking care of ourselves. And frankly, as soon as I started saying this, I remember doing it on a whiteboard right as COVID started, because we were like, this is not working. Like, we can't possibly do all of this. Like, let's figure out like, okay, we do want to shower. I mean, we got that basic, like we do want to shower every day, but like, how do we do all of these other things? And, what are the nice to haves and what are like the need to haves? And so that was part of it, is to categorize everything that needs to happen and then truly divide it evenly. And what will happen, if you're anything like my family or most women, is that will work really well for like a weekend. And then one of two things happens. One, they're not doing it right, and so you do it, and it's easier or faster for you to do it yourself. Or they just don't do it, and then you end up doing it, right? And this is not to man bash at all. This is just like human nature, right? And again, in respecting that, like, we're trying to build a family that's different than what we were raised with, right? And so like calling that out and like giving kudos to both of you for trying to set a different example and model something, that wasn't modeled for you. And so when those two things happen, it's on us, man. We got to like let it get done wrong. We've got to let it not get done, and let the consequences happen from it not getting done. Okay, great. So there's no milk. Well, I'm not going to be the one then to run out to go get the milk. You have to not get the milk. Oh, you don't think we need milk? Because here the level of caring is often very different also. And so my husband would be like, put some orange juice in it, put some water in it, the cereal. And so great, you deal with our children then. instead of me dealing with our children when you're telling them to put water in their and their things. And so it really is like the natural consequences that come from it and allowing that to happen and play out fully. And then also just recognizing like what your superpowers are. Like I'm really great at like multitasking, and like Instacart and I are good friends. So like I can get all the groceries here. And if he went to the grocery store, it was like setting him up for failure, because he'd come back and like he'd have the things, but like not the things that we needed, like all the wrong brands. He wouldn't understand how crunchy peanut butter was different than regular peanut butter, and all of that. And so it's also just recognizing like, okay, I am better at that, and I'm going to take those things on, but you're better at this, or you could learn to be better at this, right? And it's also excusing away the behavior. Like he will sometimes say, you are just better at multitasking. No, I've been forced to learn to be very good at multitasking, right? And so it's just, it's taking the gender norms out of, again, like what we saw our parents do, and just starting from scratch, and learning from those things. But it is also constant conversations. It's resetting them. As your child gets older, like the things will be different that you need to do, and you may naturally take on the new task that emerged as they developed into a new stage. And so it's resetting that. And then we also, we do it monthly, like very purposefully, but frankly, it's a daily juggling task. And it changes. My husband used to travel 4 days a week before COVID. And so we had more help in the house then. Now we split things more, but he'll have a big meeting when he's supposed to be picking the kids up, and we'll have to, move things around. And I'm the CEO, so I have a little bit more flexibility, for example. So it's going to ebb and flow, but don't let it get to the point where you reach resentment. Because no good comes from that. Like talk about it frequently, and have a chart, have a list of things, and start calling it out when your list starts getting demonstrably longer than his. But again, to reiterate, it comes down to first, like really respecting your contributions from a work perspective, so that the other things that you're doing are valued as part of that.
That's great. Thank you so much.
I think we have time for one more question. If someone has, I love this. I really am enjoying what you have to say, sharing your wisdom, and I really thank you so much. Does someone else have something that's on the tip of their tongue?
I'll ask a question. Jill, when you were creating Motherly, what inspired you to want to create Motherly to be different as an organization, both from a company culture, what is offered to mothers? Like, what inspiration did you draw from just throughout your, creating and conceptualizing Motherly?
So, Motherly was the initial brainchild of my co-founder, Liz Tennedy. She's an award-winning journalist and editor from the Washington Post. And we led parallel lives for a while, and met when our husbands were both out of the Navy. They both went to the Navy, and at Stanford, and met very briefly, but two working moms, like who had time to, really get to know each other. And so when we were living in New York and I was just exiting with my other business, she apparently had this idea in her kitchen, and talked to her husband, and her husband was supportive, and just said like, yeah, you should run that down, like see what's there. And she called me, because one of the best things to do if you have an idea is to just talk about it. Like, don't hide it, like talk about it, and get feedback. That feedback loop is really important. And so she reached out to me just to get like advice and guidance on like, what's it like to start a business. And we joke that I called her back 48 hours later with a business plan and said we should go do this together. And she's like, I don't really know you. Like, who is this again? But I convinced her. And so, but what we really believed in was called a design thinking approach. That's very, very user-centered. And so we did hundreds of interviews of who this mom was. And we went really deep into research too. And ultimately, from my strategy consulting days, I really believe in drivers of change versus trends. And there were 3 drivers of change that make this generation of mothers different, that meant that a Motherly needed to exist. And the first we already discussed, which is that women are more educated than men, and all the things that happen as related to that. The second is that this is the first generation to become parents that are digitally native. And so that means that their ability to, our ability to harness the power of technology and our comfort with that and our expectations as a result of that, and the authenticity that we demand from brands as a result too. And even the fact that we have like personal brands and like our comfort talking about ourselves and listening to people over technical platforms. So that was two. And then the third is that 2018, and this is after we launched, but it was long awaited, is the year in this country that we had the tipping point where the majority of births in this country are now of minorities. And that's a complicated but important way of saying it, because the majority of people is still white giving birth, but our children are minorities, the majority. And so that says that families just look different than they have in the past. And so when you take all of those things together, for us, those drivers led us to want to be woman-centered, not baby-centered. Because when you have children later in life, one of the things you're most scared of is losing your identity. So beyond the health and like, how am I going to maintain who I am? And you want to feel seen and heard, and you want, like, that's what Motherly, frankly, like core thing that differentiates us is that we're woman-centered, not baby-centered. The second is that we're expert-driven and evidence-based, because it's a highly educated group, right, of people. And so we wanted to make sure that this wasn't like message board race to the bottom, that we are all guilty of, Googling late at night, that we wanted to not be alarmist in that sense. And then the last is that we're empowering and non-judgmental, because when you have an incredibly diverse demographic, we didn't ever want to tell people, you have to do it this way. Like, you should sleep train your baby, or you should not sleep train your baby. We would give expert-driven, evidence-based information, what the American Academy of Pediatrics says about this. And then we would tell personal stories that you could decide what to relate with. But we're empowering mom that she's the expert in her family, that no one knows and understands the world more than her. And that also feeds her identity in a way too, right? And is, very empowering for her. And so we like to say we're woman-centered, expert-driven, and empowering. And that's how we kind of came to that, which I remember going out to investors and a lot of old white men investors, and saying like, doesn't this exist already? And I'm like, well, you think, like, it sounds so simple, but sometimes the most simple things are, the things that work.
That's awesome. Yeah, I mean, just everything that you've talked about tonight and, aligning what your company is all about is truly what Hive is here, more on a local level of what we want to do is we want to empower parents to know that, they're not alone in all of the struggles and joys that parenthood brings to our lives. And so we're just so thankful that you're here to tell us about your journey and speak so eloquently about how you got there. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me. And just know that you're not alone in really anything you're experiencing. I think that's one of the beautiful, there's a lot of bad sides to social media, but it does help us see that we're not alone. And this journey that we're on, this motherhood journey, is really one of the most universal human experiences. And to just hold on to that. When you meet a mom, no matter where she comes from or what her background or what she's doing, just know that you actually can see a bit of her soul. Like, it's mirroring yours, right? Like, we're all on this journey together in some way. And when you peel across the other layers, like, we're all just moms that want the best for our children.
So beautifully said. Thank you so much, Jill. And even though our time has come to an end, we are all continuing on this journey. Are there any references that you would like to, we talked about this a little bit before, but we like to give our participants some sort of reference list or recommendations that, were inspiring to you or that you find are important to reflect upon during this journey?
Absolutely. So I put one in here for you just as around like having those conversations with partners. And then because we did talk about state of motherhood, I'll put in here, will load. The survey results from last year, because I think it just might be validating for you all to see that. And I'll definitely make sure that the ladies at Hive know when the new survey is coming out, because we'd love to have you participate and have your voice be heard as well. So that's there. And then I'll send over to you guys. I think you send some resources after the fact. So now that I've heard some of these questions, I'll add a few others around like just entrepreneurship in general, and also how to ask for flexibility at work and kind of motherhood related things. So I'll send those over to you guys so you can share them with your community.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jill.
Thank you. You're so gracious with your time and your energy. And we're so happy you're a perkite. You're like one of us. You know?
Here to stay.
So all the people watching.
All of it. Yes.
I know. All the people watching on YouTube who don't live here, they can be a little bit envious because we do. So thank you so much and welcome to town. And I can't wait to give you a big hug when I see you.
Thank you so much. I hope to see you guys around town sometime soon. So thank you so much for taking time with me today.
Thank you everybody for coming.
Thank you so much, Jill. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
This was amazing. Appreciate it.
Everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Be well.